For millennia, we've searched for the origin of our world. Not the geological world, but the human one. The world of laws and cities, of a shared identity. We've been looking for that moment we stopped being scattered bands and started, well, becoming a civilization. We've been searching for the blueprint. So in this explainer, we're going to venture into the archaeological strata of deep history to find it. And the answer, as it turns out, isn't found with the first cities, or even with the invention of the wheel. No, it's found 11,000 years ago, carved into stone by people we long dismissed as simple hunter-gatherers. Our investigation begins right here, with this small, almost unassuming plaque of green stone, unearthed from the soil of Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey. You have to understand, this thing is an anomaly. It's an object so sophisticated, so pregnant with meaning, that it forces us to completely recalibrate our entire timeline of human cognitive evolution. And we have a really compelling interpretation from the legendary Assyriologist Irving Finkel. He argues this isn't just art, this is a piece of technology, a stamp seal, a device you'd use to impress signs onto another material, say clay. It's a tool for ratifying, for authenticating, for transmitting information. It's a precursor to the very idea of writing itself. We're calling this our first line of inquiry, the Finkel Anomaly. Because this single, portable object, it just shatters the assumption that monumental architecture was the only complex form of expression at this time. It hints at something more, a system, a code, a shared language of symbols that could actually travel. So what are we looking at here? Well, it's a form of pictography. Each symbol isn't a sound, but a whole idea. At contemporary sites like el Amar, archaeologists call these finds proto-writing. They're devices for storing collective memory. And this wasn't for accounting, not like later cuneiform was. No, this was for myth, for cosmology, for binding a people to a shared story. And right here, we can see the vocabulary of that story. The plaque shows a very deliberate sequence. You have a snake, a human-like figure, a bird. These are not random doodles, not at all. They are the exact same icons that are carved on a massive scale on the site's giant T-shaped pillars. So this little object, it's a portable piece of the very same symbolic universe. It's a key to a much larger architecture of belief. Okay, so now let's see how this single clue starts to build a much larger picture. Because this plaque and Göbekli Tepe itself, they were not isolated phenomena. They were actually the center of a vast cultural and symbolic landscape. The German Archaeological Institute, or the DAI, oversees a project called Tashtepeler, the Stone Hills, and it's revealing an entire network of interconnected sites. Just think about this. For about 1,500 years, hunter-gatherer groups all across a 200-kilometer radius shared a common iconography, a common belief system. They carved the same animals, the same abstract signs on pillars, on stone vessels, and on portable plaques, just like the one we saw. Göbekli Tepe wasn't just a temple. It really appears to have been a central meeting point, maybe a pilgrimage site for an entire region. To understand the sheer scale of this cultural mechanism, consider this number, 266. That is the recorded number of T-shaped pillars at just one nearby site, Karahan Tepe. This wasn't a one-off experiment. This was a revolution in human expression, and it was enacted on an industrial scale across the entire landscape. This comparison is just illuminating. While Göbekli Tepe has these massive, famous pillars, Karahan Tepe might actually surpass it in the sheer quantity of monuments. And what that tells us is that we're not just looking at a single mother temple, but a distributed network, a shared symbolic landscape where all these different communities were participating in the same grand project of building their world. Which, of course, brings us to the fundamental logistical question, how? I mean, really, how did mobile hunter-gatherers, without agriculture, without metal tools, without the wheel, how did they manage this? What possible energy source could power the quarrying and erection of hundreds of multi-ton limestone pillars? The answer, it seems, is a form of social technology. Researchers like Dr. Clare of the German Archaeological Institute have championed what they call the work-feast model. Now, this theory suggests that charismatic leaders mobilized labor not through force, but through religiously motivated communal events where vast amounts of food and drink were the incentive to participate. You can almost see the process itself as a ritual. Groups would gather, drawn to this sacred landmark. They would work together, quarrying these massive pillars directly from the limestone bedrock the site was built on. And then critically, they would feast. These feasts provided the raw caloric energy for the hard labor, and, maybe just as importantly, they forged the social bonds you'd need for such a massive cooperative project. And the forensic evidence for all this feasting is absolutely overwhelming. This is not speculation. Get this. The total number of grinding tools analyzed from Göbekli Tepe is 7,268. That's an industrial quality of food processing equipment. So what does that number actually mean? Well, this is the math that underpins the entire enterprise. Experimental archaeology shows that a single person, using one of these common handstones, could produce 4.8 kilograms of flour from wild grains in an 8-hour day. Okay, now multiply that by the sheer number of tools they had. You suddenly have a system capable of sustaining a workforce of hundreds, maybe thousands, for these intensive, seasonal construction projects. Okay, now, to fully appreciate the reality of what these hunter-gatherers accomplished, we also have to address what did not happen. In recent years, a very popular narrative has emerged attributing Göbekli Tepe to some lost, high-tech, global civilization that was destroyed by a comet. This whole catastrophist theory relies on a specific set of claims that have now been, well, forensically dismantled by the scientific community. So the conflict here is between a narrative of external catastrophe and a much more profound story of internal human innovation. The evidence doesn't point to survivors memorializing a lost world. It points to hunter-gatherers building a new one on their own terms, using the power of social organization and shared belief. A key pillar of this whole argument was a 2021 paper claiming an airburst destroyed the Bronze Age city of el-Hammam. But the peer review process, it worked. Forensic experts identified digitally altered images, and on April 24, 2025, the journal Scientific Reports issued a full retraction of the paper, citing concerns with methodology, analysis, and data interpretation. And this wasn't just an isolated issue. The entire suite of evidence for Younger Dryas impact event has simply collapsed under scrutiny. The supposed platinum anomalies, found to be terrestrial. The so-called nanodiamonds, they were misidentified. And the big claim that Pillar 43 is a star map of a comet, well, that ignores that its iconography is perfectly consistent with known Neolithic funerary traditions, what's known as the vulture cult. The science on this is clear. So, with the pseudoscience cleared away, we can finally return to the archaeological strata and see the blueprint for what it truly is. It was not a technology for shaping stone. It was a technology for shaping human society. The true genius of Göbekli Tepe is its social architecture. The site is material evidence for a newly complex degree of organization. It proves that hunter-gatherer societies, which we long thought were strictly egalitarian, could develop hierarchies and specialized roles to achieve a common monumental goal. You see, these sites weren't just buildings. They were nodes in a symbolic landscape. They transformed a physical territory into a mythological one, a space encoded with meaning, with memory and identity. To walk through the stone hills 11,000 years ago must have been like walking through a living story. Ultimately, the most powerful tool these people possessed was not a stone chisel. It was belief. A shared, powerful belief system was the cultural mechanism that could mobilize hundreds of people, coordinate their labor, and motivate them to create something so much larger than themselves. Belief was the ultimate technology. And this is the blueprint. Before the first kings, before the first formal laws, before the first true cities, there was this, a machine. Built not of gears, but of ritual and myth and human congregation. A machine for making society. A machine for making us.